Welcome everybody back to the Pit Press. Ed, I always appreciate the guests you get on, man. All of the high school football coaches. I'm glad that Chris Smalls was able to come on, not only talk Lobo football, but kind of just the Albuquerque metro area football, New Mexico athletes. But it's just kind of a testament to what Coach Eck is doing and kind of connecting the roots with where they lay, man, and just kind of bringing them in. So, I mean, just what were your takeaways from that interview before we get to our next guest?
Yeah, Eric, I got to tell you that at Rio Grande, it's been very hard to build a football program there. So that's why I said I got to give it to Christopher. He's really stuck in there. They don't have a lot of numbers. A lot of them go to Atrisco. So I know he's still working. He's trying to build, and he hasn't quit. And I think better days are ahead for that program. So, and again, he had played at UNM. I wanted everybody to hear what his thoughts were about the facility when he was there, how it is now, what he thinks of Coach Eck. And, Eric, every report we hear about Coach Jason Eck and his staff and the building of the football culture here, I know you're enthused about it. I know, and think about where we were a year ago or 2 years ago, and look where we are now in just one short year. I think UNM football is on some very solid footing going forward.
Yeah, I think with the anticipation, I also think expectations are a lot higher this year. Coach Eck's second season, but we'll be covering the spring game. I don't know if you plan on going, but I talked to Greg this week. Greg was going to try to stop by and cover it for us, so we'll start ramping up our Lobo football coverage. But now that we're done with football talk, let's jump into some Lobos basketball and Mountain West talk, and we've got a special guest joining us tonight. Not necessarily focusing on Lobo basketball tonight, but we got Brendan Williams with Go Lopes Radio, who covers GCU hoops. Brendan, what's up, man? How are you? You're on mute, sir.
Great. Really good start there. I was going to say, guys, really good to be here because last time I was on, one of the most chaotic weeks that feels like it was 7 months ago when we were in Vegas. It doesn't even, just so much has happened since then. So it's really good to be back on here. Take a deep breath, take some stock at where everybody's at. It still doesn't feel normal going through all this portal stuff, like the new verbiage and all the way this stuff works. Re-signing, it still doesn't feel normal, but I think it's slowly feeling more normal. So excited to be here and chat with you guys about it.
I'm glad you can come on, and I didn't think we'd be still talking about basketball in mid-April, but here we are. Let's take a step back. About a month ago, I had a chance to meet you for the first time. What was your first impression, and how do you think GCU fared in their first round of the Mountain West tournament?
Well, I think from an honest standpoint, I think, the way GCU operates, and I came on here and I told you guys this last summer, they don't, they're not big into kind of gray areas and, C pluses or B minuses. It's kind of like pass or fail for them, how they operate, just with the amount they invest, how much they care about the program. So I think you'd have to call it, I hate using the word failure. It's not, I think that's a little dramatic, but I think if you're just looking at pass or fail, those are your only two options. You would have to call it that, right? They don't make the NCAA tournament. They don't win a game in the Mountain West Conference tournament. Sure, they were right there in the mix and one different regular season game, and maybe they're, a top 2-3 seed. But unfortunately, that's not good enough. And they had an awful stretch to start out that second half against Nevada. And, they had those stretches all year long. In fact, you guys probably would have seen one of them in New Mexico, right? That run in the second half when the Lopes were in the pit and the Lobos pulled away. And listen, part of it's basketball, but part of it is this team did that all year long, and they walked the line, and they unfortunately paid the price for it, which kind of stinks. But that's kind of the harsh reality on it. I think the other thing with it, I was pretty tough on Bryce with his comments after the game. A lot of talk about bounces going, Nevada's way. And so that was one thing I was pretty brutally honest about after the game that I wasn't super stoked about. Was just, I felt like there were other things that could have been talked about and conversed about from that game to take away. But at the end of the day, GCU, they're back at it, running a million miles an hour. As we know, very flush with cash and, making sure that they spend it and get their roster all dialed. So, I guess the show goes on, right? And we're kind of on to next year. So I think going back, though, I think it's a lot of disappointment. I think, it's a weird thing in this GCU bubble is it kind of just went like 0 dark 30 after the loss, right? Like everyone, it kind of is weird where things kind of check out. Like people, I don't think, maybe some people were mad, but I don't think they just kind of checked out. So I think as the fan base continues to grow, you're going to see more and more people, get frustrated when things don't go right, have those high expectations, and I think continue to kind of push the program forward. So excited for that, and love what they've done in the portal so far.
Before we move on to the next kind of portal edition conversation, I would say, what do you, with GCU finishing with this a bye in the Mountain West tournament, do you think they kind of exceeded expectations? Do you think they were, going back to preseason, right, when you were just like super excited? I think everyone around GCU in the program were kind of on cloud nine that, hey, we're a part of a much better conference, more competitive. They've gotten multiple teams into the big dance like in consecutive years. Obviously this year was different, but beginning of the season, did you think GCU would have ended up where they ended up?
I thought they were going to make the NCAA tournament. I thought the talent was there. I still think the talent was there. That's what I said preseason. And, sure, injuries, everybody has injuries. So I don't know if I really want to even go there and start that conversation. But again, it's just weird because yes, they're so close, right? Like that Utah State game, they're in it the second to final weekend in a place where nobody won. I think outside of UNLV, I don't think SDSU got them there. And so they almost won that game, and that would have had them kind of right in that top 2 or 3 mix. And if we recall, that was like a crazy last 2 games, right? Where who's going to get the 1 seed? Everything was really up for grabs there at the end, and GCU could have had their hat kind of in the mix there. Unfortunately, they didn't. But yeah, I think, bigger arenas, everything was a little bit bigger. I think the expectations were higher. And, it's not like I don't want to say like weren't ready, or again, it's a failure, but there were a lot of moments where they kind of checked out, like the Wyoming loss at home. Like, what the heck was that? That was just people mentally checked out. So I think, a lot of the things that we talked about, or that I talked about, called out that I saw this season, I've seen them putting effort into it in the portal, I think, to address some of those things, which is a really good sign. And I think you got to kind of come back around and be optimistic again. I think, going into last year, it's like we don't know anything other than going to the tournament, winning conference tournament. And there's a little ignorance there, right? But GCU was in the mix. They didn't get it done. And that's how this stuff works, right? Like not 368 teams make the NCAA tournament, right? Only I don't know what the numbers this year because I think they've expanded it, but that's how this stuff works. So you don't get the job done, you don't make it. That's kind of how it goes. So again, it's just a weird. I hate to say I don't really have an answer, but kind of stuck in that gray area.
Brennan, you mentioned some of the things about Grand Canyon going forward. We'll get to the portal here in a minute. Some of the players that I saw, it's like, oh man, New Mexico's had some good signings. Right now, what I looked at with Grand Canyon, wow, it's all I could say. And Coach Olin isn't done yet. And, the key player was, of course, Jake Hall coming back. And I think Hudson Mays is going to be amazing. I really do. He's got an upside, a high upside. But you guys, again, we'll get to the players in a minute. But when I looked, I'm like, okay. But you mentioned Coach Bryce Drew, one of the best coaches around, and in the conference right now, no doubt about it. Now, when some of these games that you felt like they didn't play well, was it playing, coaching? I mean, you mentioned the comments that Coach Drew made. You took issue with that. So during the season, just not the right combination? Here in New Mexico, I thought the Lobos outplayed them. I did. In the second half, New Mexico rolled in the second half. But did you think just the chemistry itself? Coach Drew comes highly regarded, but what did you think overall? Because when I hear you saying that, I've been around the game a long time, man. There's some stuff in there that I kind of want to know.
Yeah, and I think specifically on those comments, I prefaced it, my podcast talked about it for a few minutes. Like, I understand the heat of battle. You're right out of it. That's a feeling they quite frankly haven't had, right, as a staff, to have to go answer those questions and not be up there doing the ticket ceremony. So there's and you got to give them grace, right? It's the heat of battle. It's how it works. But I think the first thing that was always going to be an issue, right, is they had all those guys that graduated. Tyon obviously made his way up to Gonzaga and was able to get cleared, but they lost so many guys. And so, they brought those guys back 2 years ago. And then unfortunately, you're just going to be rebuilding regardless. So it was going to be an uphill battle, right? Like you pretty much don't have any camaraderie. You return Mekhi Williams and Caleb Shaw. Really, you're only two people that contributed from the year before. So you're kind of building it new. But yeah, I just think it was the camaraderie was a big deal. I think you saw, other teams, obviously Utah State, right? Like it's just unfair. They have those guys, they'll return for forever, right? And, they've got that core and it works. And that's just such a cheat code in college basketball nowadays. San Diego State, that was up and down sort of season, but they still had some camaraderie. I thought at the end of the season, they started, kind of really showing some signs. And I thought that was some like, where your guys are going to be, even if they're not maybe playing great. So yeah, I think the camaraderie was an issue. And then I think the other thing was just the offense struggled. Like they finished, I'd have to check KenPom, but at one point, with like 2 weeks left in the season, they were like 161st in offense. I think they ended up finishing around 130 to 132. Just not good enough offensively. That's the bottom line. One of those big things I thought was not having a true point guard. We're going to get into some of those guys, like you said, Ed, and I think they've addressed that, which I think is really exciting if you're a Lopes fan. But they just had moments where they checked out, and I don't know what causes that. Some guys just, I don't know what it was. And then on top of the offense, and then I think the camaraderie were kind of their big issues. And so, when you look at it from a macro standpoint, it feels like two of those three kind of feel already addressed, and we'll see if that third one can get addressed. But I just think, and it was, like I said, it was always going to be tough. You're losing Tyon Grant Foster, goes to Gonzaga, Ray Harrison, Colin Moore, these guys who GCU fans know, just ran out of eligibility and they went all in on it. And you had to rebuild. So part of it was just kind of the reality of college basketball today that they had to face.
Going forward, I think New Mexico feels pretty good about their prospects for a revamped Mountain West Conference. It's probably going to be a one-bid league for the foreseeable future. Look what it was this year. And you had teams that, that probably should have got a bid that didn't. Yeah. And so now with 5 teams gone, the NCAA has very little respect for the Mountain West Conference. We have to be honest. So now, with 5 teams gone, I thought Grand Canyon was a great addition. UTEP's coming in now, UC Davis. Of course, the Lobos and the Miners had battles way back on the day, man, in the WAC. But UTEP's not the same anymore. They're not. So I think New Mexico feels good about their prospects. What do you think, Grand Canyon? Again, we'll get to these players in a minute, man. I was like, man, I really was. I was impressed. But what do you think Grand Canyon's? What do you think they think their prospects are? I would think they have to be. Coach Drew has to be pretty excited from what the work they've done.
Yeah, I would say as much as, we just talked and we're maybe a little critical, right? I would say kind of doubt Bryce Drew at your own will, but I would also say doubt the GCU infrastructure at your own will. Like it's no like secret, right? I mean, everyone kind of chatters about it. You heard Dutcher even make a few comments regarding GCU, and not snobby comments or anything, just reality checks. Like GCU's got the backing and the finances to make this thing go in a modern college basketball era that requires that. Like you have to start there. Otherwise you're having to get so moneyball, right? And it's just hard to sustain that. So I would say doubt Bryce Drew and doubt, more importantly, GCU's infrastructure and the investment that they have in the program at your own will. And I think they came out with purpose in the portal, which sounds really weird to turn it into like a game, where like you got to come out in the first few minutes and throw a punch. But it felt like they were very pointed in the portal. They've got fantastic recruiters on staff, very well connected, very purposeful, I feel like, in who they went after. And they're obviously still not done. And then they obviously prioritize bringing back, Mekhi, F.A., Caleb, obviously the big three there, which I think is just really, really important. So they've passed every test with flying colors of this portal season. Unfortunately, I think last time I was here, I said, or last summer when I was here, I said, we trust that this staff can mix the drink with the talents there. I can't quite say that, right? Because 0 for 1, haven't made the tournament in the Mountain West, but I'll tell you what, the talent's really good. They've got a ton of investment, and Bryce Drew does win games. So I do think it's a mixture that could be something really special. On top of the idea that they've maybe learned some things this last year, you would hope, and they're going to continue to innovate and get better. So we'll see what that looks like. But yeah, I mean, each name that's come in, you can kind of sell yourself on it, and everybody's so different. And I love building out a roster. You maybe get a guy who's a former McDonald's All-American who maybe hasn't been great the last few years, but could pop, right? Who's going to be a veteran, and then you get this young talent in a place who maybe he wasn't optimized. So you start kind of putting your little chess pieces on the board. And I think they've done an incredible job of that. So really looking forward to how it comes together. And the bottom line is FA isn't going to be at campus late August. He's going to be here all summer. And that's a massive add. You've got Makai Williams, who's going to be ready to go right now as kind of the team leader. Caleb Shaw, obviously now healthy. He's a guy, you start this stuff out like right away now, instead of last year. It just kind of took a little bit of time, right, to get all those guys together and on campus. So I expect them to be right there. The expectation is going to always be to win their conference and go to the NCAA tournament, regular season and the conference tournament. That's not my opinion. That's, if you had Brian Mueller on the president, he would say that. So I love what they've done so far, and we'll kind of have to see how it comes together. Now, you guys made the point. New Mexico, you can type in their roster outlook on Evan Maya, and it's pretty dang good when you consider everyone they've brought in so far in return. So I think New Mexico's looking like the team to beat, especially with Olin. I just think as a basketball coach, he flexed his muscles, I thought, a little bit this last year. So yeah, an exciting year ahead. And I think 2 more really good GCU New Mexico games staring us down here. I know it's a little bit of ways, but man, really looking forward to it.
Hey, Brendan, you used a term that kind of sat really, really well with me with how GCU approached the portal. And they acted fast, man. I felt like they had back-to-back days of portal announcement, or at least commitment announcements. And I want to start this conversation with, let me backtrack there. With the whole portal conversation and the methodology and how coaches, programs are approaching it, I feel like it's a combination of a few things and how well you do each one. And the number one is going to be retainment, right? Like you have to retain your key pieces, because that and continuity has proven statistically with how rosters are built out. You see that in the highly successful teams trying to build a program, trying to build a scheme under that coach's system, having those players that understand the system play better well in it. Now, with the players that GCU and Bryce Drew were able to retain, probably consider top the Mountain West. And the first one that I'd like you to elaborate more on, because I think he just made a huge leap this year from, I think it's his second year at GCU, but with Makai Williams. I mean, how big was it for GCU and Bryce Drew to bring back Makai? Because I think he was the first big name to enter the portal. And at that point, you're like, how does this guy not end up at a Power 4 school because of the season that he had? Him announcing to come back, I'm sure GCU forked up the support and the money to keep him there. But how big was it for GCU to get back this type of player?
Yeah, retainment's massive. I think back to college basketball, let's just say mid 2010s, right? Like what would be a way a mid-major would be able to take out a blue blood first round? It was always those teams who start 4 seniors, maybe one guy who's a little crazy. They've played together for 3 years. They're probably maybe local guys. They played AAU together. Like that was always the way to overcome a massive talent advantage, right? Was these guys have played together. We've seen that sadly kind of taken from the mid-majors, right? Like we grew up with so many iconic moments of those teams and those guys who come out of nowhere. And we still get them, but that was always the way to win. And so retainment was key. And it's funny, like even going back to that, right? Like Makai Williams had a ton of interest from really big schools. I can tell you that. Like he was going to be highly coveted. I thought he was going to formally enter, and then stay in and, go to a bigger school. I just thought for that last year, that was kind of my hunch. And it's funny how not like the emotional side of it, but you're thinking like part of this is just getting momentum in the portal too, right? Like how big was the Jake Hall re-signing for you guys, right? When you just think of momentum, like
huge
for the program, and if you're a player, you're like, oh wait, I can, I'm going to have the third best defender on me if they've got Tennette and Hall signed. Like the momentum builds, right? So when he announced he was going to enter, that was a tough kind of like, man, that was a guy kind of probably prioritizing to keep. And then they were able to announce that the day the portal formally opened. He never actually formally entered. He said he was going to intend to enter, and brought him back. He was great this year. I thought he made a ton of strides. Now, I think what we thought we were getting, his first year he plays at University Texas Arlington. He's this freshman, twitchy, shot a ton of threes and shot like 45%. And so the idea was, man, are the Lopes getting this kind of sharpshooter? Now, he hasn't shot the three well at GCU both years. That's just, the bottom line. But I think what we saw this year was a confidence. And when I was talking about this kind of up and down ebbs and flows of level of engagement of the group, I felt Makai was one of those guys who was always straight lined, and he was coming off the bench. He was starting. He was a go-to guy. He was, the third option. He was everything throughout this whole season. I thought he straight lined it the whole time, was confident, was aggressive, even when the shots weren't going in. And I think it all is going to add up, I think, to hopefully a really good year for him. And then I think the big thing with Makai is this last year, him and Jaden, there's our guy, Steve Ivey. Speaking of retainment, lots of retainment over there for him. So congrats to him and the Rams. We love that. The big thing with Makai is him and Jaden just went kind of back and forth, your turn, my turn. And it was something that was talked about a lot in our Discord, I'll tell you that. And he's going to be able to play off ball of Dylan Darling, a true point guard whose pretty much only job, right, that he's known since he's played college basketball. Yes, he scored it when he was at Idaho State, but his job is he gets excited about setting others up. Like that's what he does. And so I think if you're Makai, you're saying, man, I get to be off ball. I get to have the table set for me. Yes, I get to be on ball, but he had so much creation and playmaking responsibilities. Sometimes it didn't go great. I think that's going to be even more important. He's going to be able to develop and get better. Obviously some continuity, but he's going to have a true point guard playing alongside him. We'll see defensively how that might hold up. Darling's an excellent defender, even though he's only 6'1", two smaller guys out on the floor. But to have a guy that can get him set up, I think is going to also go a long way. So, if things pop, like it's not crazy to think he's going to be in the player of the year conversation for the Mountain West if things really go well with how he played in conference play.
Yeah, I will say that I at points in the season, I think Jaden Henley was receiving a lot of the accolades. He had the highest ceiling of that group, but I thought Makai Williams was the straw that kind of stirred GCU's drink. I thought he was the most consistent player at times. And even in the Mountain West tournament, the one game that we did watch him play, he was the guy that when you needed a bucket, you went to, and he converted, right? He never really had that off night, and he kind of just made up for things. He did the little things right. And without him, GCU wouldn't have been where they were without him. And I think he was coming off the bench early in the season and ended up finding a starting role because he was just that impactful in games. But you mentioned another player that we're going to transition to in Dylan Darling, who I'm just a huge fan of, man. And I was actually really shocked to see that he left St. John's. And then, I think that happened pretty much overnight, and he was committed to GCU, and he was like, what the heck happened there? But this is a huge pickup for GCU, and he might be a little undersized, but this dude is a straight baller, gamer, lefty, shooter, creates off the dribble, but he does have that edge to his game too, where he likes to distribute, he likes to create for others. What does having a true point guard kind of do for this offense next year?
Yeah, no comment on timelines from Go Lopes Radio. This is what this team's needed. GCU had this guy, Javon Blackshear, who was kind of a local legend here. He grew up, his best friends, you guys might be familiar with him. He was best friends with Jalen House and the little Bibby. They all played together at Shadow Mountain. They won 4 state titles here. And it's funny because all three of those guys were guards. But Javon and Jalen House are best friends. And Javon was this kind of undersized, guy. Jalen House obviously always had the, kind of the fanfare. But Javon was this like true point guard, did the little things, was not like the loudest guy in the room. And since he's left, they've kind of missed that true point guard. And he was just such a program guy, and everyone speaks so highly of him. And he's just really great. He's actually still around a little bit now, working out with the guys every now and again. But they've missed that. And Dylan Darling brings that to the table. Again, I think the thing that's really hard to explain to people is, and you can just think of this anytime you've even like played basketball in even the most informal setting. We're not going to try to compare the two, but you can just think of this like when you've played with a guy who is a point guard, or you watch guys that are a point guard, it's literally a completely different switch in the brain. Like when you look at a shooting guard or even a guy who wants to create for himself, let's do this. Let's go back to like Jamal Mashburn for you guys, right? Think of his brain, how he's wired, and then think of, I don't know, how your maybe true point guard's been wired, right? Like those are two different like mindsets. And so you need one of those guys whose sole job is like, hey, I'm here to get other people like their shots. And that's what makes me really excited. As like if he's a basketball player, that's what gets him going. And so to have one of those guys, you don't find them a lot in college basketball anymore. And more oftentimes than not at these bigger programs, they're maybe not the starters. They come in off the bench and they play 20 minutes exactly like Darling did. But they're so that you just need them. Like when it's an 8-0 run, GCU struggled with this, just giving up runs. Like, where are we going? What are we doing? Like, who's taking the ball? Who's calming us down and getting a shot where we need it? Who's bringing the ball up the court when there's a little bit of pressure? It's just those little things. Dylan Darling's that guy. And the thing I tweeted out, if you look at his profile online, obviously you can kind of watch him and see he's got that feistiness and that edge, but he's a plus defender at 6'1", which is really hard to do, I feel like, in today's college basketball, especially when he was, at St. John's in the Big East. To be a plus defender at that size, at that position, there's not a lot of those guys, because you can go through the portal, right? And you can vet all those guys and say, we need a guy who's a true point guard. You can get them, but you got to find one that can hang his hat up as well on the defensive end. And I think Bryce found that. And he seems like the perfect fit and exactly what this program needs. Everyone else has to be licking their chops right now. I think if you're on GCU's roster, that you've got a guy who is going to walk into every game and his job's going to want to be to set other people up.
He's definitely going to make everybody better. There's no doubt about it. You mentioned the defensive end, and I'm surprised he didn't, Coach Pitino at St. John's, he made that big shot against Kansas, couldn't get him to stay. And again, it's not maybe Coach Pitino. You only got so much NIL money. It's got to go around to everybody. Yeah. And that shot there that he made got downhill, went to the rim, and made a clutch play. So, not only, that's in the background too. You got a guy that's made a big play in closing minutes of an NCAA tournament game, has the NCAA tournament experience on the big stage. That helps too. All the other things you mentioned, Mekhi Williams had a great season. But when you put those two together, you got a guy, and you mentioned, they say Dax Hall is like that. I watched highlights of him, Jake's brother, and that he likes to distribute. And Jake Hall made a comment the other day about he likes to get 2 feet in the paint. We know Coach Olin likes those paint touches, likes the rim pressure. He had Albury. I watched tape on him just a little bit. And so, but he's a freshman. He's coming in as a freshman, and looking forward to playing with his brother for sure. But there's others too. We'll get to those signings in a minute. But when you mentioned about Darling and that intelligence, the IQ, he's going to get it. And if you're playing with a guy like that distributes, you're going to get the ball right where you need it, and in your shooting pocket or wherever you need it, he's going to get it to you. And so, that's a huge signing. When I saw that, I'm like, man,
super helpful.
Yeah, no, it is. And there's more, and Eric will get to in a minute. But, when I saw that, I was like, disappointed, not disappointed, but you know what I mean? Like the Lobos did good, but hey, man, these guys did a really good job of getting, like you mentioned, Coach Drew is not going to sit on that season. He's going to, the season last year, he's going to improve. That's what he's always coached. So, Eric, I'll leave it to Eric to get to the other players that GCU signed.
Yeah, man. And where do I start? Because there's a bunch, and I know that you've got a pretty cool segment that you've been running out on Twitter in your impact videos. But I'm gonna pull up
Mhm.
one of your posts here, just kind of on overall roster kind of development,
Yes.
and just to kind of see. I think you pulled it from Evan Maya. If anyone out there watching, listening wants to go kind of geek out on some of the numbers and analytics, Evan Maya's site is the place to be. But this is kind of the roster outlook for GCU, and Brendan, I'll kind of leave it up to you, man, on how you want to, what order you want to go in. But who are some of the other portal additions that could potentially be like instant impact players for the Lopes next year?
Yeah, I think obviously we talked about Darling. I think, FA is really interesting to get him to return, to have size in mid-major college basketball is really tough. It just is so hard to keep it. If you have it, they're probably going to end up leaving. And FA maybe didn't get a fair shot at last year, gets in super late because of visa issues. He improved a ton throughout the year. He had some slip ups. Listen, he's a freshman. It's a new style of basketball. He's halfway across the world. Kind of just everything's new. I would expect a big year from FA. I'm really excited to see his development. We've got maybe the best strength coach on the West Coast, Coach Jack. And I just take a look at FA now, because he's going to be a totally different player by the time you see him next year, I bet. Obviously, we talked about Mackay. I think the next place I want to go, the really intriguing piece, is Blake Barkley. He's a really interesting player because his skill set's something GCU maybe hasn't had in a while. He's this forward. He can pick and pop. He's still tough down low. He doesn't want to just kind of hang out by the 3-point line. A good rebounder. And it's tough to find like a comparison to his game, but he's this tool that I don't think we've seen from GCU. And, most importantly, he's this kind of mobile 6'8" sort of guy, right? Where we saw like a JT Rock. I mean, both games, I think he killed GCU, right? Just those pick and pops. And, you got to come out and cover that. And it's tough to cover. So you got a guy like Barkley who can maybe be a little bit more mobile at 6'8", on the defensive end, but on the offensive end, he can give it right back with the pick and pop, right? So he is a really fascinating piece, in my opinion. I love what he brings to the table. One thing you got to watch with him is he went to Northwestern, didn't do a whole lot there, then went to East Tennessee State, and he popped. I mean, like popped. Went crazy this year. Third team all SoCon, I believe. And yeah, just really filled up the box score. So it's one thing to see, maybe how that translates to the Mountain West. I think it should translate pretty well. Maybe some increased facilities, some work. And, I know you guys obviously have followed football. Like the old saying, right, is there's a big jump year 1 to year 2, but the biggest jump, right, is year 2 to year 3. That's the year he's going to be in. So I'm really interested to see how he develops. Blake Barkley as this, this tool that Bryce maybe hasn't had, this pick and pop big. Maybe not going to blow anybody away on the defensive end like Nano this year, but a true kind of pick and pop big who can be mobile on the outside, but is also kind of nasty down around the basket. He's super intriguing. The only other guy I'd touch on, just because he's a really interesting story, is Tyler Barrand. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with him, but he actually played in his final year of high school basketball here in the Valley. My buddy his dad coached him at a small school here in the Valley, and he was about 6'4", 6'5", was a shooting guard. He graduates high school. He goes off to the Navy, gets to the Navy, and all of a sudden grows 6 inches in 1 year. So he goes from this 6'5", 6'4" sort of guard to he's this 6'10" guy now in the Navy. And around 2020, so he's, I think, like 27 now. So I want to get out there. Anybody who's mad about Bullion last year for you guys as a 23-year-old freshman, GCU, you can send them our way, and they can be mad at us for having probably the oldest player in college basketball. But I think around 2021 or 2022, he's in the Navy and his ship's getting worked on, and he goes to play at the local community college. He's like, hey, I grew to 6'10". Then Tulsa recruits him, and he goes to Tulsa and plays 2 years, and now he's going to play at GCU. So I couldn't find him. I think 26, 27 years old, went to the Navy, grew 6 inches, just decided while his ship was getting worked on to go play at the local community college. Tulsa ends up recruiting him. He's this big guy, legit, really good, big body, and now GCU's got him. It's a crazy story. It really is.
We are more than familiar with him. We previewed him when UNM played Tulsa in the NIT. And he shut down Bouillon to some point where like Olin had to go to TJ Rock at some point in the game just because he wasn't as impactful. But I still have the graphic. I'm surprised I didn't change it. But 6.4 points per game. But he also does a really good job on the rebounds. But he's super physical, athletic. But I think that also comes with he's a more mature man, right?
Yeah,
But he sets a lot of screens and he's good at setting up shooters. He's a good passer. So I kind of an underrated addition for GCU. I don't think he's collecting a whole lot of chatter out there, but this is an instant. I think he starts for them probably. You need that 6'9" frame, but he kind of stretches the floor a little bit too because he will go out. I think he took 1 or 2 threes against UNM too, which we didn't anticipate, but an interesting addition. But we're more than familiar with him, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, just one quick comment on him, and about and I think Eric's right. 27 years old, and you mentioned you have a great strength coach. He's already a grown man strong, right? Grown man, and the setting of the picks is going to be huge, I think. And it's not given enough credit. They talk about coming off picks and off the bounce, but sometimes they forget the screen setters themselves. So I think when I saw that one. That was another one. I'm like, oh man, because I saw the NIT final against Auburn. They won the game. They had the game won. If they bring it in, it's over. Auburn gets a steal, and they hit the 3. Otherwise, that game's over. They win the NIT. And bounces happen. Bounce, good bounce, bad bounce. And but that guy there is going to, think about it. Guy's 27 years old, man. 27.
Yep.
And so grown man, and he's only going to get stronger. He's already strong. That's another, I think, under the radar. You mentioned that, but that's a signing that's really going to help GC.
Well, I mean, you think about it, it's like FA's a legit 7'1". I mean, he is big, FA. Now, he did get pushed around a few times this year. I thought he got more physical as the year wore on, but it's like, we'll see what the lineups look like. But when we're talking, FA at 7'1", and then Barron coming in at 6'10" as a full adult, that's legit size and strength. And we saw this last year, right? And Evan Maya talked about this a little bit, is just how much size now is dictating college basketball. And so it's fascinating. I think they've done a really good job. They've been very, like you said, Eric, I don't know what that word is, pointed in the portal. And I think that if you're a GCU fan, that has to get you really excited to see a staff listen after, a letdown year, call it whatever you want, but a staff that's taking this serious. They knew what they wanted to do in the portal. They made the list. They're going out and doing it. Yes, it's a little bit easier when you're GCU and you've got the investment, but they're going out and they're doing it. And they're making those adjustments. And like I said, they're still not done. I know the Lobos won't be done either. But things are coming together really well, I think, for the Lopes. And then, it's going to be up to Coach Bryce Drew to stir the drink again. And, it's really exciting.
Well, thanks again for coming on, Brendan. I don't mean to cut this short. I know that we could probably talk GCU hoops or even just Mountain West hoops all night long, but we've got plenty to talk about. We've got a long summer ahead. We plan on getting Mike Cooper on too, from the Scarlet Standard. I know UNLV has retained some key pieces, some key young pieces, and they've added some nice additions from the portal as well. So I think we'll come to you kind of consistently throughout the summer. We'll do some joint shows, all 3 of us on. Maybe we'll get some other folks on from around the Mountain West and just kind of continue this conversation and keep things going. But thanks for coming on the Pit Press, man. Any final thoughts? Any last things you want to send off with?
No, I think just really excited. This last year, a lot going on GCU world, and to see New Mexico obviously retain Jake Hall, Uriah Tenet, and then to see GCU kind of continued investment. I just think we're going to continue to see those two clash in a really awesome way. 2 unique fan bases. One, this kind of not necessarily old school, but this ton of tradition, and you've got this kind of GCU new sort of team. I think it's just got to get you really excited for what these two teams are going to be doing over the next few years and the battles. Excited that Olin stayed, excited that Jake Hall came back. You're right, Tanek came back as well, and they've added some really good pieces. So, man, it's going to be really good. Hopefully some other people, continue to invest. We see some other teams step up, but yeah, we've got a few months, so we don't need to peak too early and get too excited, but it's hard not to just keep looking at the roster and refreshing Twitter, right? It's this time of the year. So,
and I'll leave you with this thought too for maybe the next show we have on, but Wyoming has retained some
what I've been saying.
pieces, so they kind of add more. I mean, some compelling conversations to that mix. But Ed, any final thoughts from you?
No, Brennan, thanks again for coming on. I think you know what, we're looking for rivals, right? San Diego State's gone. They're out of Colorado State years ago was a rival. Utah State, they're all gone, man. So GCU, logistically in the same region, could be that rival for UNM. And when they come in the pit, be ready. When we go there, we got to be ready because they've got some fans. Hey, you know what, Brennan? I think it's going. I think we're setting the table for GCU. Gosh, it's impressive what they did. Very impressive. I think New Mexico's done some work. Coach Olin's not done yet, but you mentioned those two teams should be considered. I think right now Wyoming's done some good stuff, but I think New Mexico and GCU are going to be right there, man. And two games, those two games next year, I think we're kind of setting the table for it. I know I'm already excited just by what Grand Canyon has done, and New Mexico's not done yet, but those are going to be some great games.
Yeah, my final thought is if you guys could put a word in with the New Mexico Lobo Twitter admin, if we could, I didn't need the J call step back against GCU. Couldn't use the Fresno one for the announcement for him coming back. I mean, we had to use the GCU one, the game clincher. Like, I don't need to see that video anymore. So if we can get that just gone, that'd be great. New season. Yeah, just, oh my gosh, man, he's insane. Gosh, could have used the Fresno one. So maybe a note for the social media admin.
One last simple question from one of our viewers. I don't know if you know any of this or want to speculate, but what is the GCU's estimated NIL budget? Have any idea?
Yeah, I would say GCU's is a lot. I would be very shocked if New Mexico's anywhere close or in the ballpark. Would be my speculation. I think it was definitely the way it was speculated and talked about last year. It seemed like GCU might have been the leader potentially last year. Again, all speculation, not sure. I would imagine, GCU takes this stuff seriously and they want to win. And, they've got a thriving business to, make that happen. Really good partners, Jerry Colangelo, some other people. So, they're positioned well in modern college athletics. I don't think we have to, I don't want to say be weird about it, but it's like, it used to be this thing where it's like, oh, GCU's got a bunch of money, or like High Point, they've got a ton of money right now. Like, it's just kind of how this stuff works. Like, they invest and they've got the money, so they're going to go and get after it. So, I would be very shocked if UNM's was anywhere close to GCU's.
Okay. Well, I'm going to throw a figure at you because I know that like Big East schools, power conferences, 10 million is like what they're budgeting for a roster.
Yeah.
GCU, higher or lower than that?
I don't know about that. Again, it's just speculation. I don't think they would be there. That would be pretty shocking. I don't think they would be there at all. But yeah, I feel like everyone kind of inflates everybody, right? It's like everyone's making weight because it's in everybody's interest to say they're making more money. Every deal I feel like is kind of done differently. So I wouldn't know any sort of numbers. But I'd feel pretty confident saying by and large, they will be the biggest investor probably in the new Mountain West for sure. And I think they might have even been in the old Mountain West, but yeah, they take this stuff seriously and they want to win. That's how you get from being 2,000 students at a school to, where they're at now with 20,000 in 15 years. It's not by kind of just like moping around. Like they invest and they make plays and they invest in things and try really hard. So yeah, that's probably my answer.
Okay. All right, Brendan, we'll get you back on. I know we're already coming up in an hour and 20 minutes, but I want to thank everyone for tuning into the Pit Press Live tonight. I want to thank Ed for getting your guests, talking Lobo football, spring ball, and for Coach for joining us, and Brendan Williams, Go Lopes Radio. Everyone have a good night. Thanks for tuning in.